Good afternoon and welcome to this feature session, Moving Mountains and Rivers in a Flat Landscape. My name is Rod Hughes, I'm General Manager of the Swan River Trust and I'll be chairing this afternoon's session. Can I make special welcome to any visitors from interstate or overseas? And in opening this session I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Noongar people. I'd also like to acknowledge our many other partners that we work with that have special connection to the rivers. I'm going to provide some background information on the Swan canning system and some of the challenges that we're facing, although I think if you were at last night's River Prize dinner you might think that Tim Winton gave part of my talk. We're going to hear then from a range of speakers from the Trust, but also from our partners that help us deliver some of the programs. Now look, we're at day 3, we're after lunch at day 3, and you've had quite a few PowerPoints thrown at you, so we're going to muck around for a minute actually. On your tables you will find a balloon, or several balloons. Could somebody, I'd like you all to inflate the balloon, and the first person that can get a fully inflated tied-off balloon to me will get a magnificent prize, so it's worth it. Please, have a go. I want to know that you've got a bit of breath in you at day 3. Well, yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Up to me. I want a fully inflated, tied-up balloon here, say. He's from the Swan River Trust. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. We're going to collect the balloons later. They won't get lost. Still not ready to get serious, sort of. If you've been to other talks, you might know that we have an oxygen problem in our river. We don't have enough. We're obliged to artificially maintain oxygen in certain sections of the Swan canning, and there are large pieces of machinery that look a little bit like this at various places around the waterway. Now let's make some assumptions. Let's assume we had 60 filled balloons here, each with about 6.5 litres of pure oxygen. One of our plants up on the Guildford Road Bridge up in the middle Upper Swan delivers 70 kilograms of pure oxygen an hour. How long would it take us to deliver the 60 balloons worth of oxygen? So I'm testing your computational skills. I'll take potluck guessing though. Anyone? Have a go, there's a prize. Okay, how long would it take? I'll give you a hint. In seconds, how long would it take our oxy plant to deliver 60 balloons worth of oxygen into the river? 1 second. You win a prize. You're wrong, but you win a prize. The answer, and I won't give you the calculation, is 26.7 seconds. Okay, thanks. The Swan River Trust. We're a statutory authority, state government agency, set up 21 years ago under the Swan River Trust Act, but we had new legislation come in place in 2007, and that gave us by statute the job of enhancing and protecting the ecological and community benefit and amenity of the Swan and Canning rivers. Ecological and community benefit and amenity is the precise wording of the Act, kind of interesting construction, but designed to really show the two sides of our business. We are somewhat of an unusual entity at the Swan River Trust in that we are a statutory planning authority, a waterway health manager, and we're a park manager with the riverbed vested with us. So we've got a wide brief, but we hope sufficient powers and scope to have some chance of success. For the record, we get most of our funding from the state government. We access what we can of the federal funding, even if we're not the Murray-Darling. And interestingly, we get a funding stream that arises from the casino. Every year we get $3 million through a funding source under the Estate Agreement Act. So by all means, if you've got time afterwards, go over and make a contribution to a good cause. I know that some people have already. Everyone says they've got a big job as a river manager. This just gives you a bit of a sense of our river if you haven't been to other presentations. So a relatively short Swan River, draining with a canning, a coastal plain catchment of over 2,000 square kilometres, but add into the mix the Avon River, and we have a catchment twice the size of Tasmania. We love our river. Ask anyone who was born in Perth or lived here for a long time and they'll tell you their special connection to the river story, be it memories of learning to swim, fighting off the brig-bound jellyfish, prawning maybe in the early days, camping, certainly swimming and boating and the like. And of course the Noongar community has had a very special connection spanning tens of thousands of years, a very spiritual connection to the home of the serpent Waggle, and of course a practical one because it was a life-giving waterway. So we love our river for all these wonderful things that she delivers for us. Seems we love our river so much, we've done all these fantastic things to her. Cleared the catchment, bulldozed the river channels, piped the drains and streams, tipped our waste chemicals into her, run our boat yards next to her with some pretty old practices. Now, I don't think that we're necessarily any worse than any other river, as you've seen from other presentations, some of the issues that people are dealing with. And it's certainly the case that we still get many of those positive values, but these are the kinds of things that we've done. So it is not surprising that we're dealing with a system under extreme pressure. And we tend to group up those pressures in three ways, just for the sake of discussion. So water quality and ecological health, shoreline degradation and so on. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Again, to keep the theme going, we've got a changing river. We know that the processes that we're talking about and pressures are underscored, if not directly driven by, seasonal and climatic change. So we made a good start in changing the way our system functioned hydrologically in the 1890s, where we took the rock bar out to create the Fremantle Harbour at the river's mouth. So this allowed much greater intrusion of marine waters. In the meantime, of course, you've seen much less fresh water coming into the system, fresh water that's now laced with nutrients and sediments and organic matter. So we have our river flowing for a very short period of time for the year. Our salt wedge estuary gets locked into place, stratification, and those extreme low oxygen conditions. Now, I think we've been, various speakers have been milking this photograph of a microcystis bloom in 2000. It's probably atypical, but it tells the point. In terms of water quality and ecological health, though, we've got the range of water quality problems affecting the rivers and mainly the usual suspects I'm sure that many of you are familiar with. So nutrient enrichment, the oxygen depletion that I've spoken about. Non-nutrient contaminants, there's been some papers presented this week on that, mainly from historic but some current practice. Of course, acute incidents such as sewage spills and chemical spills, sedimentation and feral fish invasions and invasive weed species. Our nutrients are coming from the rural and urban catchments. It's not one source at all, so you have to be working in a catchment coast way. And as you heard also, blooms are most common through spring to autumn, and autumn in particular is becoming a really problematic month for us, of season for us rather, where we have warm still conditions, maybe a pulse of fresh water coming in from some rainfall and then locking back into summer type conditions. And another ecological outcome that we have is that key recreational species such as prawns and cobbler can no longer be caught, and we certainly have no commercial fishery to speak of. We talk of the thin green line and the thin grey line. The thin green line is where we see our representative samples of flooded gums and maybe some sedges along the river's edge. The mature trees are falling down as the shorelines recede. The sedges are really a fairly thin line and they're under pressure from encroaching park lawns. And of course we've got problems of no recruitment of young trees coming forward in some places to replace the older ones as they go away, and the weed species of all kind abound. We do have a positive program dealing with our partners in responding to that issue along the shoreline, but the little inset photograph shows another pressure where we have a bit of private gardening, if you like, in the public domain, where people will want to enhance or protect their views by going in and chopping, drilling, poisoning and otherwise sort of interfering with the shoreline vegetation. And I speak of the thin grey line. If you've been out and about on the river, you would have seen the lower reaches are of course contained by large stretches of river wall. Not much ecological function, of course, but they're necessary to protect riverside infrastructure. They're subject to the forces of nature, and of course that means an ongoing maintenance and replacement program, and they're fiendishly expensive. And lastly, that group of pressures, development and use. Riverfront property, of course, is prime real estate. The river remains a very vital and important recreational facility. You've got more and more people wanting to be down near the river, on the river, in the river. Now this can bring with it the opportunity for modern spec development, so we can bring good environmental controls into place. But of course it's critical that we get the balance right and protect the very values that people are trying to enjoy by coming to the river. And we really do find that the river is incredibly good at polarising people's views. So you would have seen our wide open spaces in front of the river. Some people love that. Others in the community feel that this is a terrible waste of space and that we should be building more down to the river to connect to it. Some people love boating on the river as a natural way of connecting to the waterway. Others that we deal with see the person driving a boat as having horns and a bifurcated tail and really doing rather nasty things to the waterway. Growing population, of course, the space in which that growing population wants to operate is not getting any bigger. And so our job is very much this striking a balance of often competing uses. I've talked about the pressures, some of the negative side of things. I want to assure you for all of this, we still think it's worth the fight, that the river is obviously delivering for us many positive values and is remarkably resilient given what pressures we're throwing at it. And to keep it that way or to improve it, we of course have a range of programs that are delivered through the Trust and others. Many, many challenges, many people involved, and it's clear that it would be foolhardy and just silly to apply isolated standard operating procedure type responses to such a complex system. You can't act alone, you've got to win hearts and minds and integrate that effort. And I hope that as you see the presentations that come, they give the truth of this quote, and that you need that effort from catchment to coast. What we're going to see now in the presentations is some elements of that catchment to coast approach. And I must stress that it's not all of the things that we do. There have been some other presentations during the week, particularly in relation to our river health and river science programs. And that's been a way of, I guess, giving a more fulsome picture of the work that the Swan River Trust and partners do. So we're going to start up at the top with Roxanne, who's going to talk to us about the legislative responsibilities, how we share that load and set a management framework. Paul and Jennifer will talk to us about the Trust's statutory planning role. Deborah from the Department of Water will talk about drainage management. Then we'll go down into the river park and foreshore, and then have two presentations about our engagement with the community in the rural and urban settings. Now again, we want to make a slight departure from the norm. We would like to engage you a little more in some two-way discussion. So as each person presents, they're going to put a question back to you, and we're going to have a very short period of time where we'd like to draw some responses from you over 2 minutes at the end of each presentation. At the end of the full session, we certainly plan to have time for